there? How do we know that God's really there? And really, it's come down to the idea about faith. And we, none of us have seen God. None of us will see God until it's time to see God. So we really have to rely on faith, don't we? And that's really what it comes down to. So that's what we've been talking about. This is our 5th lesson on this. Is God really there? So last week we talked about there was an instant, right? There was an instant that we read about in Scripture, and that instant was what? What was it we were talking about last week? Abraham had the faith, right, to do what? Yeah, the faith that he had faith. He had seen God's promises work, but the idea of faith, of course, is that he did what? The greatest example that we find in Scripture, in what we understand faith, is that faith that he would go so far. No one else will find expected to do that, but God fully expects him to be faithful to the point where he would be willing to sacrifice his son, right? Sacrifice Isaac, that son of promise. What's that? Yeah, that's faith, right? Show me faith by your works. Well, part of our works is our obedience. What do? We are obedient. That's how we show our faith. What was Abraham? Did Abraham show his faith? Well, with flying colors. He passed that test with flying colors. I mean, he had the knife up ready to strike Isaac directly in the heart, to bleed him out, as he had done to all of those sacrifices that he had sacrificed up until this time. So, but that this sacrifice was different, wasn't it? Man, big time. This sacrifice was different big time. Because this was not some goat that he had no meaningful relationship with, or sheep that he had no meaningful relationship, or an oxen he had no relationship with. It wasn't even somebody else's child that he didn't have a relationship with, right? He was expected to kill his own son. And I believe that Abraham, not only did he display his faith, but he also, don't you think that he gained maybe a greater kinship with God? Don't you think he understood God maybe a little bit better? I mean, if Abraham were alive when Christ was walking and was expected to go to that cross, Abraham would understand what that was like. He would know where God was in the idea of giving up his son. Okay, it's an important distinction. Yeah.
He knew in some way and felt that God was.
He said that. He said that. Here's the thing. Even though he was told that if he had to strike his son down, that God would raise him up, he would still have to strike his son down. I mean, that would be a difficult thing for parents. Even if I knew for a fact, 100% fact, that after I did that God would raise my son, I would still have to take a knife and drive it into the body of my son and put him to death. That's a difficult thing. That would be, and the idea that that Abraham had enough faith to do what God said, he also had enough faith to know that God, if he actually required that sacrifice, that God would raise him up from the dead. Yeah. So we also talked about the account of Jesus healing the man who was born blind, right? All right. We saw that progression of faith go from simple belief to a faith. Because if you notice from the very beginning, he said, well, it was a man that healed me. It was just some man. And then at the end, Jesus reveals himself as the one who healed him, and he acknowledged him as what? Lord. He acknowledges him as Lord. All right. So we saw that evolution of simple belief going to an idea of faith. All right. So now we're gonna not gonna shift gears, but we're gonna talk maybe a little bit more about it. Now here's the question, because if there's faith, if there is a thing called faith in the world, then there must be something called doubt, right? All right. Now we have to be careful. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm getting ahead of myself. The question then is, if we understand that there's belief, then there must be, of necessity, be the opposite of. Now I'm getting ahead of myself. It's not the opposite of faith, but there must be something known as doubt. If there's faith, then there must be something known as doubt. Now, the question is, how do we respond to doubt? It's more of a rhetorical question, but if anybody wants to answer, feel free. How do we respond to doubt? Because that's a difficult thing. And we all, I think, respond to doubt maybe a little bit different. And we have to be careful about how we respond to doubt. And we'll get to that towards the end of the discussion this evening, about how we respond to doubt. What does doubt do to us? What can we, if we're not careful, allow doubt to do to us? What can doubt develop into if we're not careful? But the question does remain: if there is doubt in our minds, and if we are mature Christians, then doubt has come into our minds. Doubt sharpens faith. That's how it works. If we don't have, if we've never experienced doubt, then how can we say that we really have a faith? Because that's what strengthens a faith is having a doubt and then working past that doubt with whatever method we use and with whatever materials we use. That's how we strengthen our faith. So how do we respond to doubt? Here's another question. Do we know doubt when we see doubt? Or do we confuse it oftentimes with something else? Do we know doubt when we see it? Or do we maybe confuse it with something else? All right, good question. Good question. And let me ask you this. Do we sometimes confuse doubt with unbelief? Do we sometimes confuse doubt with pure unbelief? Because I've seen too many Christians be dragged down into that quagmire, because when a doubt arises, what they oftentimes do is they equate that with, well, if I have doubts, then therefore, and it's not an intentional thing. It's not like they're saying, well, I have doubts, so I'm going to close the door on my Christianity, I'm going to walk away from it. But they begin to fear that they've fallen into unbelief as opposed to simple doubt. Remember, I said that doubt and unbelief, our faith and doubt are not. They're not opposites. I'm going to write that down because I'm going to forget to say this. The idea of faith is not the opposite of doubt. Faith is the opposite of unbelief. But faith and doubt, can faith and doubt exist in the same person? Of course it can. Of course it can. Because sometimes our doubt is not over whether God is existent. We may look at it and we say, well, I believe that God is there. I believe that He's there. I believe that He made the universe. I believe that He sent His Son. But then there's a particular portion of our faith system, so to speak. I hate to use those nebulous words, but of our faith system, our belief system, and we look at that and we may have a doubt over that regard. How many people say, I believe that God is up there. I believe that He loves us. I believe that He sent His Son to die on the cross for us. I believe all of those things. There's 100%, there's no doubt in my mind, but then we doubt whether He really hears our prayers. Does that doubt in God hearing my prayer equate to disbelief in God? No, of course not. Right? So what do? We take that doubt and we work through that doubt. We study, we pray, we go through all of the methods and all the methodology there is at our disposal to work through that doubt. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, but here again, like I said, our belief, the idea of having a doubt, you could equate doubt with an unbelief in a particular thing, and it's not that you see. There's a difference between, say, for example, there's a difference. They don't like to say this, but there's a difference between an agnostic and an atheist, right? An atheist says there is no God. An agnostic says there's no way to tell whether there's a God or not. That's what I equate to the idea of. It's not that I doubt that. It's that I have my doubts about whether God is hearing me or not, and it could be for any given reason. It could be a personal thing. I have doubts that God hears my prayer, not that God hears prayer. I have doubt that God hears my prayer. Why? I'm a terrible person. I'm a sinner. I've sinned. Well, join the club. Okay, If we have to pray to God for forgiveness of sins, what does that make us? It means we've sinned. Does God hear the prayer of a sinner? Well, when they pray with a righteous heart and they're attempting to reconcile with God, yeah, of course He does. Right. Right. There's a difference, isn't there? There's a big difference. Yeah. Right. As a matter of fact, I tell you what. Let's look. I'm going to jump forward a little bit because we've landed squarely on top of something that actually I was going to use as our text for tonight. Everybody turn to Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9. And we're going to start at verse 14. I'm going to read it. It's a long passage, and I want to be able to stop where I've got some specific points I want to bring out. So turn to Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 29. So there's a relationship then between faith and doubt. There is a relationship. It doesn't mean that they're antithetical. It doesn't mean that you can have faith. If you have faith, that you can't have any doubt. It simply means that there's a relationship between the two. And we're going to see a fellow who had both belief and he had some doubts. It's important to realize this. It's important to realize because I think it speaks to our condition. I dare say that there are many Christians, even mature Christians, who, while they're 100% certain in their belief in a God and a God who loves them, a God who sent His Son, and the idea that they're saved and all of these things, that there's still a doubt that creeps in every so often. It's something that must be dealt with. Now, having said that, simply because it's a small doubt doesn't mean that it can be glossed over. You know, you get a splinter, a small splinter. I'll give you an example. Just a tiny little splinter right in your finger, right? It's small. It doesn't really hurt when you push on it. No big deal. I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to let it go. And then what happens over the next course of a couple of days? It gets red and then it gets puffy. Then all of a sudden it starts maybe oozing a little bit, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, because there's this small thing that appeared to be small on the surface, what does it do? It grows into something greater. So simply because there's a doubt, and it may be a small doubt, it doesn't mean that we can simply bury it and not worry about it because it won't affect us at all. We do have to work through these doubts. And how do we work through them? Well, we'll see here in just a couple of moments. Look what happens in Mark 9. Faith and doubt are not polar opposites. Okay, they're not on opposing ends of some belief. It's like I'm in unbelief, and then there's doubt at the other end. No. There's belief, and then there's unbelief. Okay, faith is something that occurs in our belief when our belief becomes mature, and we grow in our belief, and our belief eventually becomes a faith. All right, so let's look at this, and so let's look at this fellow. Mark 9, verses 14 through 29. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. Imagine that. And as soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. He asked, "What are you arguing with them about?" Well, anything they would give them the opportunity to. That's what the people of the law did. They like to argue. The idea of kibitzing is simply people, they would walk around, they would talk about the law, they would argue the law, they'd find a portion of it and they would argue the tiniest little things. But he says, "What are you arguing with them about?" And a man in the crowd answered, and he said, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him on the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." Now, there's no explanation. The point of this is not to prove that there were evil spirits that were in the land doing all of these things. That's not the point behind this. It's without a doubt that it happened because we find it in Scripture. Jesus certainly acknowledges this as a spirit because we see what he does. Okay, that's not what the point of this verse. And we got to be careful when people want to take this and they want to make this a proof text about something. The point of that is not behind the idea that there is a spirit in this boy. That's a foregone conclusion because we find it in Scripture. The point of it is what's about to occur and how Jesus uses this as a lesson for this man. He says, "I asked your disciples to drive out this spirit, but they could not." I want you to remember that. The disciples could not drive out the spirit. All right? So we're going to figure this out here in just a couple of moments. Look at what Jesus says immediately following this. Why do you think that the disciples could not drive out the spirit? What's the very next words that come out of Jesus' mouth? "You faithless," mine says unbelieving, okay? Faithless, unbelieving. Ooh. So here we see that faith and belief are on the same side of the spectrum, right? Unbelief is on the other side of the spectrum. Doubt, we don't find doubt in here. He says, O ye of unbelief, O you unbelieving generation, you faithless generation. Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? You probably could look at this and see where Jesus despairs, but he's not despairing of being with them. That's not what he's despairing of, being with these people. He's despairing of the fact that they have no faith. They're unbelieving. That's his problem with them. Jesus is willing to dwell with them as long as it takes. He loves these people. His problem is that he's been with them, and yet they still have a problem with belief and faith. There's his issue with them. He's not saying, man, I wish I could just get rid of you. No. He says, my problem is that how long shall I put up with your unbelief? How long shall I put up with your faithlessness? This is my problem. This is what I'm dealing with here. Jesus replies, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So they brought the boy. When the spirit saw Jesus, again, foregone conclusion that there was a spirit in this boy's body. We're not looking at emotional issues. We're not looking at psychological issues. We're not looking at things. It says, when a spirit saw Jesus, it's a foregone conclusion that there is an evil spirit in this boy. It immediately threw the boy into convulsion, exactly the way that the father described it. He fell to the ground and rolled around foaming at the mouth. Now I want you to think about this for just a couple moments. Here's a father that for, as long as we understand, has seen his son being possessed by this evil spirit. And the idea of possession simply means that he has no control over it. It controls him when it sees fit. It keeps him from speaking. It throws him on the ground. It rolls him around. And what does it say that he does? Look, it says, Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It is often, look what it says he's done. Here's a father who has watched his son from childhood deal with this evil spirit. And what has it done? It says, it has often thrown him into fire or water to do what? To destroy him, to kill him. That was the purpose. It's done its dead level best to kill this young man. So you can imagine this family, their overriding concern on a daily basis is what? They got to be riding herd on top of this young man to keep him from being thrown into fire or water, because if he does, he'll die. Now, some people would say, well, maybe it'd be better if this young man were just to die. At least the spirit wouldn't be him anymore, and he wouldn't be at any risk for being horribly killed. Maybe it would be better if he just... No, that's not what the Father says, right? He says, I'm still watching after this boy, and I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't throw out the spirit. And Jesus, when he's talking to these people, when he's talking to that unbelieving, he was talking to those who could not drive him out. Now look what he says. He says, from childhood it has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. And look at the words here. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. All right. Now, okay, I'm going to keep going. Jesus says then this, if you can, everything is possible for one who believes. All right. Now, I want you to hold your place there and go to Matthew chapter 21, verse 22. Matthew 21, verse 22. Somebody read Matthew 21. I tell you what, read verse 20, because I don't have it down here for context. Read 21 and 22. Whoever's got it.
Also, say to the mountain, be removed, cast it will be done. Whatever thing you ask in prayer, believe you will receive.
Okay. So here we have a little bit of a context about what Jesus... Now, who's Jesus talking to here? Is he talking to the Pharisees? He's talking to his disciples. Okay. So here we have a little bit of a context in regards to what Jesus... Remember what Jesus is saying to his disciples in Mark chapter 9. After what he just said in Matthew, let's look at what he says to them in Mark 9 on the basis of what he says in Matthew chapter 21. All right? Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe and what? You shall receive. But, okay, but I'll tell you what, we'll finish this little story in Mark, and then we'll go back to this, and we'll see what we can glean from it. If you can, says Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. As we just read that he tells his disciples in Matthew chapter 21. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Now we look at this and we say, that phrase, that can't be the same. That's a contradiction. And I've had people tell me the Bible contradicts itself, and they go to this verse. And I'm thinking, you don't understand the Word of God. If you look at this and you think that this is some sort of a contradiction, you don't understand the Word of God. You're not interpreting it correctly. You're not explaining it correctly. This man says, "I believe, help my unbelief." All right. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, now it's interesting that when he sees that this big crowd is going to get ready to gather, he hurries it up. He says, when Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. All right, I'm going to stop here because I'm going to ask you a question. What did Jesus have that his disciples didn't have? How was he able to cast him out, but his disciples were unable to cast him out? An absolute 100% infallible belief that if he said it, it was going to happen. That's the only difference. His disciples had been given the ability to do these things. The boy's father knew that they had been given the ability to do these things. Why else would he have brought him? So the man had at least a modicum of belief. Or why would he have dragged this boy to the disciples of Jesus Christ? Maybe he didn't want to bother Jesus. I don't know. That was the case a lot of times. You didn't bother the master. The disciples handled a lot of this. They would go, remember, Jesus' disciples would go and argue with the law, the givers of the law, the keepers of the law, while Jesus, that was a commonplace thing. The rabbi was kind of removed from it. And his disciples would do these things for him. So maybe this man thought, well, I'm not going to go bother Jesus himself. I'm going to go bring him to the disciples. He says, I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't cast him out. And immediately Jesus says, "You unbelieving generation." He wasn't talking to the Father, he was talking to his disciples. "You unbelieving generation, how long will I be with you?" Not the man, but the followers. The problem was that when Jesus said something, he did it with a 100% undeniable belief and understanding and faith that it was going to happen. That if he said it, it was instantaneous. So what can we glean from the fact that his disciples could not cast out that demon? What was the difference? What did they have? What did he have that they didn't have? A complete belief. So what did his disciples lack? They lacked faith. They were doing it, and I don't even ask me to explain why they had unbelief. I don't know. I mean, they had done things in the past. They certainly could have done this. Look what he says, continues on. It says, the spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can only come out by prayer." Here's the problem. If they're going to pray, over this young boy and cast out this impure spirit that was seeking to kill him, the prayer had to be accompanied by what? An absolute faith, an understanding, a knowledge, foregone conclusion that whatever they said was going to happen, that God would do it. Jesus had given them the power to do these things. They had the ability within themselves as far as the gift of doing these things. The problem was this kind comes out by prayer, but the prayer must be accompanied by faith. Let's get back to the idea here. He says, look when the boy says, when the boy's father said, "I believe, help my unbelief," he's talking about two different things here. He's saying that there is a belief. The problem is I have what? I have my doubts. I have belief. If he didn't have belief, he wouldn't have brought him to the disciples. There has to be at least a modicum, a small portion of belief for him to have ever brought those people. If there was no belief, would he have ever dragged the boy to the disciples in the first place? No, it would have made no sense. You know, if I don't believe something is going to happen, I'm not going to make a stab at it. But he had to have some belief. However, he had some what? He had some doubts. He had some doubts. And it could be that when he could have conveyed that to the disciples. I mean, I don't know. I am not putting words in the mouth in the scriptures. I'm not. I'm thinking about with what we understand about prayer and belief, and those two things being must be accompanying one another. What this man might have said. He might have said, maybe you can't do it. Maybe, guess what? They may have started to believe. Maybe we can't. Maybe this one is too powerful. Maybe this is something that we can't do. Maybe this is something that we're not capable of, but maybe Jesus is. But whatever it is, it certainly infected them to the point where when they were praying over this young man, when they were attempting to cast out this spirit, it wasn't happening. But the man says, I believe, help my unbelief. Help my doubt. Help me get past whatever it is. But you know, it's interesting that when he talked to Jesus, this is the interesting thing. We talk to Jesus, and Jesus says, if you believe, it can be done. And he says, what? I believe. I may not believe that your apostles or your disciples could do it, but I believe that you can. Where's his unbelief then? He says, I'm asking Jesus, help me where I'm lacking in my belief. And see, here's the thing. This is the lesson that we get from this. When there's doubts that come up in our own lives, and they do come up, hopefully unbidden, and hopefully they're temporary because we work through them. But when we have doubts, we don't simply disregard those doubts, because those doubts can lead us to unbelief if we're not careful. So what do? We ask Christ. We believe, help me where I don't. Help me where I doubt. Strengthen me where I'm weakest, because that's really what it is, isn't it? Doubt is a weakness, and we want to excise that weakness out of us. We don't want weakness found in our spiritual being. We don't want any kind of weakness, because guess what? The devil's going to try to hit us in our weakness. So I don't know how many people I've spoken to, Christians, and they said, you know, I believe that God, I believe. They said, but I just have my doubts about this whole concept of, did God create the universe, or did He simply just set things in motion and they did what they were supposed to do? And that, you know, to them, that's a doubt. Can it be worked through? Certainly so. It needs to be worked through. 100% needs to be worked through. But does that negate everything else that goes on in their lives and their belief? No, it doesn't. But that doubt must be taken care of. It must be worked through, or that doubt can lead to unbelief. And that unbelief can lead to a rejection wholeheartedly. Because I've seen too many people who grew up having been taught what was correct, and when a doubt arose, and that doubt is put in by other people, they hear something spoken by a teacher or a professor or a respected figure, public figure, whatever, and all of a sudden they allow that doubt to get in, and that doubt quickly becomes an unbelief, and then unbelief leads to a rejection of everything that they've ever understood. Mm-hmm. Yes. Much like, if you remember my sermon from Sunday, the idea of why doesn't God do something? And that doubt comes in, and we think about, why didn't God do something specifically, exclusively for my circumstance? Now, I think about Sister Yolanda, and when I hear about this, and I don't know what it is, but especially when you have children involved, it just breaks your heart. I mean, you're just overwhelmed by it. And if I would dare say that there were times when after she was diagnosed, that her belief in her belief in God and His love and everything has not wavered. But there's doubts about, why did He not? Why me? Why did this happen to me? Why this? Why stage 4 pancreatic cancer? Why not first stage skin cancer? That's at least treatable. All these little things, and I'm not saying she has. I'm just saying it would not surprise me at all if that's one of the things that comes into our lives, especially in times of sorrow, times of trial, times of turmoil, all of these things. There's some doubt. What about the Christians? What about the first century Christians that were in Jerusalem? All right, big, heavy persecution at the time. Do you think there were some doubts that arose in their own minds? Yeah, why else would they need to write letters of encouragement to them? Yeah, of course. Doubts arise. Fears dismay, as the hymn says. But just simply because we have doubts does not make us unbelievers. It doesn't. We haven't gone into disbelief. We simply have a problem that we have to deal with in understanding why God's will works the way that it works. And another thing, part of the explanation is this. Sometimes we just don't know. How you said she was in her early 50s. We think, why is someone that young? Why is a early 50s person dying of stage 4 pancreatic cancer? What I don't understand God's position in this. Not that God sent cancer to her; He's taking her. But the idea of why did He allow this to happen to someone so young, someone with children, someone who's a member of the church? Why can't everybody who dies just be outside of the church? Why does anybody in the church have to die the way that this person is dying? Why can't everybody in the church live well into their late 90s and then everyone die in their sleep, surrounded by their loved ones? I mean, but that's a question. That's a question. Yeah. 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 As a matter of fact, what you just said, I'm going to jump back up to what I was going into before we got into the story, the text. Faith does not grant us an immunity. It does not grant us immunity to crisis or calamity or trial or tribulation or grief or any of those things. And that's another thing that I think a lot of people take issue with when they become Christians. I think their first big, strong test of faith is when, but I'm a Christian. Why am I having to file bankruptcy? I'm a Christian. Why did I lose my job? I'm a Christian. Why is my marriage in turmoil? I'm a Christian. Why has my child decided to do this? Why has my child been arrested? We think about all these things, and our faith does not grant us an immunity to all of these things. And you're absolutely right. We're all failure, disaster, disease, death, turmoil, trial. They're all part of the common lot of every single person who has ever walked this earth. Even men of faith, even men and women of faith, were they immune to the trials of this world? I think about, God rewarded a lot of them simply because they went through a lot before they got there. I think about Joseph. Joseph was second in command of Egypt, but what did he have to go through to get there? I mean, his brothers beat him and threw him in a pit. Then they sold him into slavery. And then he got there and he enjoyed a position of authority for a while, and then he was falsely accused and then ended up languishing in prison. And God rewarded him. Now, there was a purpose behind it. He was sent there to preserve life, but he had to go through a lot to get where he was. That's the common lot of men. We are all going to have to undergo problems and trials and tribulations. Job was certainly, that's a case study, right? That's a case study of faith. Did Job's faith in God ever waver? No, his faith in God never wavered. He said, God is God. God is supreme. But did he have his doubts? Yeah, he had some doubts. Why me? I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I sacrifice. I don't even just sacrifice for me. I sacrifice for my children. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. Did Job have doubt? Yeah. What was his doubt about? Why him? Why not somebody else? I've done everything I'm supposed to do. So did he have some doubts? Yeah. But did he still have belief? Yeah. Belief never wavered. As a matter of fact, God commends his belief and his faith in God and chastises his 4 friends and says to Job, he says to them, petition Job that he may pray for you to me. He didn't say, I want you to repent. He said, I want you to go to Job, acknowledge him as being correct, and then I want you to ask him to pray to me for you. So did Job have faith? Absolutely. Did he have doubts? Absolutely. All right? And we're all going to have problems like that. Our faith is not an immunity to it. But regardless of the faith system that we have, those things are common to every single person. Every single person. Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, atheist, all of these, everybody's going to, if you live in this world, you're going to have to suffer the cares and the affliction of the world. Now, Christianity does not guarantee our success in life. However, it is the very best, and I'm not coining a phrase here. It's the very best faith alternative that we have to live in the midst of crisis. I don't know of another faith system that's quite like Christianity. There's a reason. When Brother Clayton comes and talks about the work that's going on in India. He said those people, when we proclaim to them the gospel and the fact that while they're undergoing tribulations in this world, that if they're faithful, that they're going to be, they have a salvation that's waiting them. And the Hindus believe that, hey, you suffer in this world and then you're reincarnated, you might suffer for another 100 years. And then you die, you might suffer for another 100 years. And then you die, you're reincarnated, you might suffer for, and this may go on constantly until you achieve that level that you're supposed to achieve. What kind of faith system is that? Who would want to believe in that? I don't understand that. Christianity is the very best faith system for dealing with the crisis that we have. There's not one better. What's that? It's very simple. And there's a great deal of promise that comes through Christianity that doesn't come through the rest of the faith system. And I'm saying this like there's, we pick and choose, hey, you pick this one and tough luck. This is an alternative to a lot of people. For a lot of people, they hear the truth that comes out of the gospel, and it's an eye-opening experience. It's an eye-opening experience. They understand for the first time. But anyway, it doesn't guarantee our success. It doesn't guarantee that the Christian is going to be free of doubt and uncertainty. I mean, becoming a Christian doesn't erase everything. It's not like, well, you're a Christian, that people think that when they come up a new creature, that everything has been taken away that was imperfect in the sense of their ideas and their mindset. No, it doesn't. What it does is it opens you up to the truth about where we are in our place in our relationship with God and how we can improve on that relationship to God's satisfaction. But it doesn't guarantee that all of our doubt and uncertainty is going to be removed. But it does offer the very best possible solution to the doubt and the uncertainty that we're going to experience, that everybody's going to experience at one time or another. Okay? Does that make sense? So when this man says, I have belief, help my unbelief, we understand because we can say the same thing. Lord, I believe. Help me where my belief is lacking. Help me where my doubts have arisen. And all of us are going to have different ones, right? Why me? Why is this happening to me? Why is there really forgiveness for this sin? I've had people say that I believe in God and I believe that He forgives sins, but I doubt that He would forgive mine. I don't believe that He would. I don't think He could forgive mine. It's not that He can't. It's that He wouldn't. There's no way He would. There's no way He would forgive this. There's no possible way He could forgive this. I'm too far gone. I've heard people say that to their everlasting detriment. Oh, I believe in God. I believe in His Son. I believe in forgiveness of sins, but I doubt that He would forgive mine. I've just gone too far. And then and an interesting thing is you hear what they say, what sin could you possibly be talking about? And they say it and they think, you think He hasn't forgiven greater for other people? It just doesn't make sense. But then again, the doubts that I have might not make sense to a lot of people either. But the whole point is that there's the idea of that faith and doubt are not polar opposites. If we have doubt, it doesn't mean that our faith is gone, that we're faithless. Just because we have doubt doesn't mean we have unbelief. It just simply means that there's something that we're struggling with in regards to our understanding about God. And remember, God hasn't changed. It's our problem. That's on us. It's our understanding. It's not God. We've got to work through this. And the great thing about it is He says, I'll allay your doubts. I'll put your doubts to rest. But you have to lean on me. You have to come to me for the answer. Don't go to the world. The world's just going to make you more confused. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's interesting that lest we think that doubt somehow separates us from God, remember that even in spite of the fact that this man believed and had doubt, Christ didn't say, well, until you figure out your doubts, come back when you get your doubts figured out. He never said that. He didn't say, hey, come back when you get everything figured out, when everything's clear in your own minds and you've got everything figured out, and you've got all of your doubts are assuaged and everything's clear, then bring your son back to me and I'll heal him. That's not what he said. That's not what he said at all. He still did it. That doubt didn't separate that man from Christ. You know, Christ didn't say no simply because this man believed but yet had some doubts. And he's not going to say no to us. He didn't say, well, I'm done with you until you get this taken care of. You get this figured out and then come back to me and then I'll receive you back to myself. That's not what he says at all. He healed the man's son. And immediately. Do you think that man had any doubt when he left? So what do we need to do sometimes? We need to see Christ in action. Sometimes seeing Christ in action gets rid of the doubt, right? I'm sure it did for that man. Now, he may have doubts about something else, but you think that man, when he took his son home whole for the first time since childhood, that spirit was gone, depart, and he says, depart and never come back. So when that young man stood up for the first time since childhood, and he could take him home, and he didn't have to worry about losing his son to some freak accident because of this evil spirit, do you think this man had any doubt in his mind that Jesus had the ability to take care of the situation? None. The doubt was gone. Why is that? Because he saw it in action. Well, then what does that tell us? What do we need to see? We need to see Christ in action. Physically? No. Certainly not. You know, I get a kick out of these. I watch YouTube every so often. I'll get on a video, and I like watching a little series of videos, and some of them are, I've seen a couple of them that are titled Faith and Humanity Restored. And somebody will do something, it'll be a little minor kindness towards someone else. And I don't know if that necessarily faith in humanity is restored, but certainly a little portion of it maybe. But the idea here is that when we see our brothers and sisters in action, acting as Christ would act, what does that do to our faith? Does it strengthen it? Does that eliminate some of the doubt in our own mind? How many times have you said, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but I doubt that my church family loves me. I doubt in the true sense of love that my church family has. And what happens? When the church family all of a sudden just demonstrates love, that little doubt, gone. Our faith has been restored. Our doubt is assuaged. Our doubt is gone. And our faith is back, and it's strengthened. It's not just back, it's been strengthened. Because I know that, if I run into a situation, if I run into a problem, I can go to my church family. If I ask them to pray for me, they're going to pray for me. What does that do? It strengthens my faith. It eliminates my doubt. Okay. So anyway, anybody got? I want to see it. Anybody got anything they want to add? Okay. Yes. Yeah, and again, the doubts that arose were different for every single person, and some of them may have died with those doubts. They may have died with those doubts. Does that take away their salvation? No, it doesn't take away their salvation. To die though with doubt would certainly be. I think about people who die alone, and they're hoping for somebody to come and help them, and they die alone. That nobody came. Do you think they had doubts in their mind when they died? Sure. Part of that goes into the idea of the faith about what happens to us when we go. Our faith in that must be, we have to have absolute faith in that. And I've seen people who have doubts about that as well. How can I know that I'm going to go there? Not that heaven doesn't exist, but that I'm going to go there in spite of, of what I've done. There's still doubts in their mind. It doesn't negate their salvation. God still works in spite of that. But, isn't it better to live life without doubts than with doubts? I think so. It's better for us. I think it's better for our psychological health to live life without doubts. In as much as we can know. Now, we got to be careful that we don't say, well, we don't know this, and therefore I have doubts, and but it's not given. We don't find that in Scripture. That's a whole different thing. To find something that God doesn't speak on, has nothing to do with anything in regards to our salvation, and making that some sort of an issue about, well, if God loved us, He would have said something about this. We got to put that out of our minds as well. Okay. All right. Next week we'll pick back up with number 6 in this lesson. Appreciate everybody's comments, everybody's attention, and we're going to have one verse of our song number 454. 454 is going to be our song of invitation, and we invite anyone who needs the prayers of the group